Good to see you all.
And happy Christmas. This is our last session before Christmas. So we'll have a 2-week break after this, so like the Christmas week and the New Year week. I thought for the last session, it might be quite nice to just sort of talk a bit about displaying work. So I brought loads of frames in, just to show you some of the frames that I use and how I tend to display my work, just to see if that's of use to you. Yeah, I just think it's quite nice to get work into frames, really. I know we sort of work away, but some of you I know show you work, some of you belong to art clubs and show things and that sort of thing. So my framing, I've always done framing for quite a long time. When I left art school, I worked for a framer for a little bit. So I've always been slightly inclined towards making my own frames. You can buy frames. So this one is a ready-made frame, and this sort of frame is really quite cheap. I can't remember if it's like £5 or £10 or something like that. But you can buy these sort of frames, I think, in the range. So if you're working to like a standard sort of size, it's not a bad idea to just get a ready-made frame. They come with glass. Some of them come with the window mounts that you've got in here. Or sometimes you can buy those separately. So I know something like the Range, and there's other shops as well that will sell these kind of standard size ready-made frames. You can't see on the back, but they have these little clips on the back. I'll show you on another frame.
Paul, you just mentioned the range. I don't know if everybody knows, but the home base at the top, and maybe that's going to be a range.
Oh, is it? Yeah. Where is that? What, up in the... Oh, really? Yeah, that's going to turn to a Range, is it? Yeah.
Next to Sainsbury's.
Yeah, and there's probably lots of other shops that do these sort of frames as well. I think some of the DIY shops, some of the supermarkets do as well. Actually, I think even like Tesco, Sainsbury's. So I mean, these sort of standard frames, you can pick them up in all different colours, white, black. This is actually just a sort of plastic wood effect. It's not actually real wood. But I tend to, for things like sketches, or if I'm working to a standard, things like watercolours, I don't really want to start making frames then cutting glass. It's more the glass side of it. I don't particularly want to cut, I mean I can cut glass, but I'd rather not really have loads of glass around. So and it's almost like cheaper to buy one of these. So that works quite well. If you can, what I did find is that there's one of my students told me about this company. It's called Kandinsky. And they do, like, if you wanted to buy quite a few mounts at a time, these are really very cheap. And this is like a sample pack they sent me, but you can kind of get the mounts, these backing boards, and these plastic envelopes. So this is quite a nice way if you want to sell work. I know some people are members of Southend Art Club, and quite often they have like little browsers, and they'll sell maybe some cheaper works off in a browser. But this is a good way if you want to display your work. If it's on paper or something like that, you can just put a mount on, stick it in one of these plastic envelopes. So I found that when I looked into it, I think I probably bought about 10 or 20 mounts at a time, and bought like the whole kit. But it was as cheap to do that as it was to buy a mount board and cut them yourself, really. And then if you buy a mount board, you've got all this waste, these bits that don't fit on. So this is actually a really cost-effective way, particularly if you're working sort of regular sizes. So someone like John who does watercolours or sketches, say, if you're working A4, I mean, I think this might be one of their mounts. I basically buy mounts for if I make prints or if I do take sketches. So this is just a sketch out of my sketchbook, but popped in a frame. I've sold these sketches for however much money, between 70 and 150 quid usually. But they have people have bought them for that sort of price. So that is quite a nice way of displaying your work at not huge amounts of money. So if you're thinking to show your work, have a look in these different places and see what sort of frames are available. And it's also worth thinking about painting towards certain sizes, like standard size paintings. A lot of the boards that you buy in the art shops are standard sizes and will fit in a certain standard size frame. Not all of them, but some of them will fit. I've always tended to work to certain sizes. So when I first started showing my work, I think the first place I showed my work was in the mill there. I had an exhibition a long time ago. And then after that I managed to get into the art trail. And I remember the first time I was in the art trail, I don't think I framed anything. I just had works on canvas. And if you've got canvases, you can just put a hook and cord on the back and maybe paint the sides and just hang them directly. But I had a lot of work that was just on bits of board like this, so it really needed a frame. So I started making these kind of frames. So these were the first kind of frames I made. And I just went to the DIY shop and bought some wood and made the moulding. And that was the sort of frame I made, either those ones or these ones that are more like a float frame really, which is perhaps a slightly more contemporary way of showing work. I quite like these still. I've gone off white painted frames, although a lot of people still use white, but I've tended to prefer other colours now. So that was the first. So I made quite a few of these, but what I've done since then is some of them I've repainted. So like this is a repainted one, then I've made another frame and put it on the outside just to kind of make it a bit more fancy really, a bit more attractive. So that one I've done that too. And what I have yeah, here we go, that one, that's another one. I basically this was a bit of moulding I had and I basically just put it around the outside. So I just thought it made it look a bit more attractive. So that's my way of slightly updating some of my older frames. So yeah, as I say, I started off just literally buying wood, but the problem with buying wood and making your own, it's very time consuming, and the wood you get in the DIY shops has got a lot of knots in, and then it's really difficult to paint over the knots I found, and the colour comes through. So I started doing that, and I started buying mouldings from the wholesalers, so a picture frame wholesaler, some that sell this kind of moulding. And this comes that sort of colour, and then you can paint it up, whatever colour you want then. So that's pretty much what I've done ever since. So this is one of the older ones that's in white, and I've also now what I tend to do now is go for a grey. I also put this. It's almost like a frame inside a frame. So I put these little inserts in. So I buy this thinner moulding and then make it slightly bigger, and then you've got the kind of the grey and the insert, which I think looks quite attractive. When I show my work say up in London, I see a lot of this sort of style of frame. So I'm kind of influenced by other artists and the way they display their work. And when I go look around the sort of galleries I aspire to show my work in, I often don't very often get in, but the sort of places I like to get in. This is the sort of frames that a lot of artists use. And when I showed my work with the Wapping Group earlier in the year, in October, there were a lot of this sort of style of frame with the wooden bit and then the inner bit. And the nice thing about these is you can paint them yourself. Now these I've made myself, but there are companies that will make these sort of frames, and you can buy them just the raw wood and then paint them up whatever colours you want. I'm not sure the prices. You might be looking at maybe £30–40, perhaps a frame, something like that. As I say, because I used to work in picture framing, and then I bought my own equipment to make frames. I do make a lot of my own frames. The downside of that is it's very, sort of time consuming, and it's nowhere near as easy as I thought it would be. But it's sort of doable. But yeah, that's what I tend to aspire to now. One or two of the others that I brought are really just different variations. When I bought my equipment, I bought it second-hand during the pandemic, actually, a lot of it. And the guy who was selling it, I think he must have bought up a framing business, because he had hundreds of bits of moulding, and he wanted to sell them on, and he gave me a very good price, a price I couldn't refuse. So I bought loads of mouldings, and these sort of frames are just with me sort of practicing making frames and just seeing what my pictures look like in different frames really. I quite like this sort of style of float frame. They're not the easiest, because I do a lot of work and quite often I swap my frames around, I swap the paintings. If say at the weekend I took 3 paintings up to the gallery, I show my work in Hornsey on the Hill, and you know, some were in frames, some weren't. I had to just sort of swap them into different frames I had really. So for me, I've got a lot more paintings than I have frames. So as I say, I tend to work standard sizes, then I can just swap them. So for instance, this is 14 inches by 12. That one I think is 9 by 12. So I tend to just stick to certain sizes. The downside about this type of frame, from my point of view, is if it gets damaged, it's a sort of slightly plasticky finish, and I can't really mend that. Whereas the wood ones, I can sort of fill them and repaint them, and they'll look just as good as new. And the wood ones, because you've got these little, these ones that just fit in from the back, you've got these little flexible points. And these, you can just sort of kind of bend these back and just very quickly and easily take the picture out. So the kind of ready-made frames that you get from the shops will have those in. This is like a sort of staple gun, so this is what I use to just put some more in if I need to. So that just kind of shoots little tabs in. So I think that's about £20–30, so that's quite a good bit of kit if you are, you know, putting a lot in and out, and the tabs, sometimes the tabs fall out or they break off, so sometimes it can be useful having that. So yeah, that's basically what I do for my display. And have you put your work into frames? Yeah, good. Yeah. I mean, the other thing is just going to a nice framer's and getting a nice frame made up.
Next to the art shop.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, that, is it called Framing?
10% off if you belong to an art.
That's right, yeah. If you belong to Southend Art Club or Rayleigh, probably. Next to Lawrence Matthews, yeah. They are really good. They are frames that I have used myself occasionally when I wanted something a little bit special or something a little bit different. Or somebody that has wanted me to do a painting and then they wanted a particular frame. So they're good, and they're quite quick as well. So that probably would be the one that I'd recommend if you want to go to a framers. Yeah. Okay? Yeah.